In the first part of Lab 3, we showed you how to reuse community-created nodes. In this part, we're going to show you how to reuse community-created flows. We're going to be using Conversation, and there is a tutorial for it to help you. So I'd recommend you go through this tutorial. And we're going to be building the OK Watson Starter Kit application. If we go to its own home page, you'll see the flow that we're going to be created, and it also points you at the documentation for the toolkit. There are two JSON links. One is the flow, the other is the conversation starter. So if you have a look at the conversation, if we right click the raw button, we can save the file. It's going to be a JSON file. Make sure it says JSON file. So take a look at the file. We'll see it's been given an extension of TXT. We need to modify that. It is a JSON file. I'm going to open it in an editor just to check that it's okay. So it looks okay. I'm just going to prettify the JSON, and if the JSON wasn't okay, that would have failed. I'm not going to save the file, leave it as is because it's fine compressed. Now if I go back into Bluemix and find the conversation service and select it, the home page for the service on Bluemix gives me an option to launch the toolkit. This is the conversation toolkit. I just log in with my IBM ID. I'm going to import the workspace, which happens to be defined in the single file that I've downloaded. And we import everything: the intents, the entities, and the dialog. When we come to Node-RED, we're going to need the workspace ID. So if you view details, that's the workspace ID that we're going to be using. But for now, let's have a look at the conversation itself. And you'll see it's split into intents, entities, and the dialog. These are the intents. I'm going to just check whether Watson is ready. It's not ready yet. So these are the intents for administration. These are the intents for asking for a demo. So any of these sample sentences or something that looks like these sample sentences would be interpreted as intent demo. And for intent, looking for feedback. The entities that our conversation is looking for fall into these categories. The interesting one is the topics. So these are the topics it will be looking for. And the dialogue itself, it's fairly flat. So looking for the intent greeting, looking for the intent what is, looking for the intent feedback. So it's not a complicated dialogue flow. We'll just check, yes, it's ready. We can actually now test it out. I'll try forcing it into one of the demo questions. Determined that this is a what is question, and it's determined that the entity is Watson. And you can build on this conversation, the entities and the intents as you wish with the conversation toolkit. Let's get back into our lab. The second link is the flow link, and this is a neat way of copying existing flows into your own Node-RED workspace. So this is the flow. We just copy this into the clipboard, and that's ready for us to use from the clipboard in our Node-RED instance. But before we go down that route, the OK Watson flow that we're going to be importing uses two concepts. To demonstrate this, we're going to just modify our hello world. So just give this tab a name. And we're going to add in some link nodes. So this is the first concept that the OK Watson flow uses. That are new to us now. So I need another inject node. I look for link nodes. And we grab one input link node. and 2 output link nodes. Link nodes are used to tidy up your flow, so you don't have so many wires crossing over each other, and they also allow you to cross from one tab to another, but we'll see that in lab 4. So let's get rid of the wire between the inject and the translator, shuffle the links around, and now we're ready to start linking the link nodes. We're going to give them names so that we can recognize them. So let's click on the first one. This is our Hello World inject. Click on the bottom link out node. This is going to be our Goodbye inject. And let's click on the single in link node we have. We'll give this a name. This is the input to the translate, and you can see that the other 2 links are there, and we're going to link those 2 out nodes into this in node, and we can see the virtual wires as they've been created. Just link the 2 injects into the appropriate out links. Change the second inject. As I watch this, I'm realizing that I'm putting this text in topic. This is an error. It should go into the payload, but this will come out as an error in a few minutes. So we wire that to its appropriate link node. You can see, if you want to see how the link nodes are linked together, you can, but normally it just tidies up the display. So let's try this out. The Hello World inject works. The Goodbye inject fails because we haven't provided a payload. This text should be the payload, and here I realise that I've just overwritten the clipboard. So the flow I put in is no longer in the clipboard. Let's give this a name again so we can distinguish it from the many inject nodes that we have. Let's deploy our change and try the Goodbye out. This time should be okay. And there we are. One other thing that we need to show, and for that we're going to use a function node. Which we'll place between the translator and the debug. So what we can do in a function node is actually write to the debug. So if you have a fairly complex piece of JavaScript function in the function node, you can output some text, and this is a technique that the OK Watson flow uses. So we deploy that and we'll clear out the debug and try it out. So there you see that we have this extra piece of debug being displayed. So let's go back and create a new flow. We call it OK Watson, and we can import flows from the clipboard. Now of course I've corrupted the clipboard or modified the clipboard, so we need to add the flow back into the clipboard. So let's find our raw flow, copy that back into the clipboard and paste it. And there's a pre-built flow for us. If we shrink this down a little bit, we can see the whole flow. You can see it's making use of link nodes, and we'll just explore how this flow works. Sample text in comes in here, so we have some pre-built inject nodes with text. That link node goes to Tone Analyzer, so we're performing tone analysis on the input text. We also have a microphone and speech to text input, which again also goes into the Tone Analyzer. Let's configure the speech to text and set the language. We'll be speaking in English, but you can choose whichever language you want. So let's have a look at the Tone Analyzer. We actually are just looking for the emotion. And that goes and feeds into this function node, which looks for the tone with the highest score, and it also has a node 1. So this function is actually going to be logging to the debug. At the bottom, we'll see that it's putting the top emotion that it's found into message.additional context. And if we click on the conversation node and look at the info tab for it, you'll see that that's how it splices in additional information into the context object for conversation. And you'll see the tone analyzer goes into the conversation. Now the conversation needs a workspace ID, so we get that from the conversation tooling. To go back one page, view the details, and copy that workspace ID into the clipboard, and we can paste it into our conversation Node-RED node. So that is now configured. I'm going to leave the Twitter node as is, unconfigured. We can see that by the red triangle. But we will update the text-to-speech, set the output language. We're now ready to deploy. We get a warning about the Twitter node not being configured, but that's okay for now. We'll try this out. Send in one of the sample texts. And of course, because we've got the speaker node, you should be able to hear. Let's try the microphone. Click, speak, click. And we can see the data packets as they flow through the node. Let's look at the config section of this flow. It has a reset context, which resets the conversation to the beginning and flushes all the context objects. Set user details calls this function in which we can specify our Twitter handle. So this is the handle that we're going to tweet to. Of course, that links directly into the conversation. So we'll now configure the Twitter node, and this is going to be the Twitter ID that you're going to tweet with. Can be the same Twitter ID, so if you only have one, that's fine. We just need to allow the Twitter node to write to Twitter using our ID. And we see the red triangle has disappeared, so the Twitter node is configured. We can deploy our changes. And now, when we set the user details, conversation knows that we've provided a Twitter ID, and that's been saved in the context object. So we can ask for demos. Just have a look at what this text is. Do you have any demos? And we can actually speak that in. So let's speak that in. We see the response come through, and we will have been tweeted. So let's look at Twitter. Let's look at our Twitter timeline. There's my timeline, and there's the tweet that my Node-RED flow has tweeted. You see a lot of those in my Twitter timeline as I've been testing this flow out. And there you are. You now know how to reuse existing flows that have been created by the community. They can be quite complex flows as the one we have, which makes use of speech-to-text, conversation, text-to-speech, and tone analyzer, and also Twitter. So you're now ready to move on to the more advanced flows.